Offensive security pro tips, this time on Hak5. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Hak5. This is your weekly dose of Technolust. My name is Shannon Morris, and I have a special guest today. With me is Dan Tentler, aka Viss. Hi Viss, how are you?
Hi Shannon. Hello Internet.
Hello Internet. So Viss, or Dan Tentler, you can find him online. What's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is just like it sounds, Viss, V-I-S-S. That's correct.
So he is the CEO as well as the founder of Phobos.io, correct?
Yes.
And he's here to discuss with us a lot of information about offensive security, because while that's something that Darren and I talk about a lot of times we also talk about like protection. I guess you would describe it as like blue team-esque ideas and ideals, but we don't really go a lot into penetration testing as far as like out there in the real world, and we don't really discuss offensive security, and that's what Viss does 24/7 pretty much. I mean, running your company, that's like your life.
More or less, yeah.
So I wanted to get you on the show to talk to me about your job and kind of explain what Phobos does in itself, as well as how you kind of got here.
Certainly. So I came up being a sysadmin. Like my first jobs back in 99, 98 were all like tech support, helping mom and pop and grandma connect Trumpet Windsock to the internet on Windows 95 and 98.
No!
That's how I started. Yep.
Oh, God.
And it was just fixing other people's problems for money.
Yeah.
And that's effectively what I still do. They're just different problems.
I feel like that's what a lot of our audience does. It's just like fix the computer for like $50 here and there or whatever. And then you finally get a job where you're a systems administrator and that's your full-time thing. It's your position. And it's fun, right?
Yeah. Well, to a point.
To a point, exactly.
Yeah. So at some point, you spend a lot of time building systems, inventing systems, wiring them together, making sure they putter correctly and they make all the right noises and all the bells and whistles go off. And then at some point, some people, some of us, like me, we decided it'd be more interesting to take them apart instead of building them.
Oh, I see.
And it gets really interesting to where, like, I've been using this analogy a lot recently. It was like, if you're going to be a car thief, it'd probably help if you knew about cars.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
right?
That's
If you're going to steal a car, it might help to know, like, what a car is, how they work, what the electrical systems are like, where the alarms live, right? You're not gonna be a very good car thief if you've never touched a car before.
So because you came into security as a systems admin,
right,
you already understood kind of the back end of how systems and how networking works. So you were able to jump into security and be like, okay, well, since I understand what operating systems, what software, and what kind of commands and what scripts people are using, you could break into them too.
Yeah, so the easiest way to wrap your head around it is if you're a sysadmin and you spend your days hitting Exchange with a sledgehammer, or dealing with SASL, or configuring like MySQL master-to-master replication, or any of this nonsense, you know what a massive pain it can be when like one little thing goes wrong, or like an errant semicolon, or a white, if you're a Python person, a white space in the wrong place.
Yeah, that's a thing.
When you understand what the daily sort of trials and tribulations are for sysadmins, and suddenly you put your bad guy hat on, now you have this treasure trove of like an attack arsenal. Now you know what you can do to like disable a system, or to make somebody's life miserable, or to break something, or to cause misdirection, or to cause, well, the art of misdirection in terms of like, I want the blue team over here working on something that's a non-issue, so I'm gonna like cause a fake problem over here that I know is benign, because I can do that to that system because I used to work on it for 10 years, but I'm gonna go over here and steal things.
Oh, totally.
Red team and blue team are kind of the same job.
Yeah.
You're doing different things to the same environment, to the same equipment. One group of people is trying to find the problems and fix them, and the other group of people is trying to find the problems and fix them, right? We're doing the same thing.
It's kind of
so
true, actually.
Red is blue, blue is red, and I'm looking forward to talking about some really interesting techniques that you can do, like
totally.
Red team techniques the blue team can use to make the red team's life a bit miserable, and vice versa. Blue team techniques that the red team can use to make the blue team's life miserable. Because again, it's basically a game of cat and mouse.
Yeah.
Like one group of people is chasing another group of people through some environment, and if you're familiar with the landscape,
it's like a tennis match.
It's more like Running Man or Hunger Games.
Oh my gosh, Hunger Games. Games.
It's more like Hunger Games, except instead of human beings running around, they're little Python scripts and PowerShell scripts and little malicious binaries running around. And
Wait,
it's like,
your description of getting into security kind of reminds me of how I got into security too. Like when I used to work as a bank teller, I mean, that was the thing. I was working full-time as a bank teller, and then while I was working there, I came to an understanding of how people can break into banks. And it's actually a lot easier than what you would think.
of course.
Of course, I'm not going to share that information here, but I learned a lot about how the security goes at banks, and a lot of stuff is like super out of date. So it was fascinating to me, and that was my first, it was kind of getting my toes wet into the idea of working in security, and that's what really introduced me to, I mean, just being here on Hak5 now. So tell me about Phobos Group. Like, what do you do? What's the company involved with? What's the whole thing going on here?
Okay. Let me start by, and it seems semi-wrong to do this, but I'm going to go for it anyway.
Okay.
I have my troublemaker hat on. So tell me, do you believe that companies like Target, Home Depot, Sony Pictures, Anthem, or any of the other companies that have experienced major breaches were egregiously non-compliant with things like Sarbanes-Oxley and PCI?
I would assume that they were.
My bet is that they passed with flying colors.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
But they still got hacked.
Yeah.
So it's fairly easy to assert that compliance is not security. Compliance is, we define compliance as the legal bare minimum to do business in the United States and be able to buy insurance.
Interesting.
That's it.
I mean, that's a good point, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
It's like getting your driver's license.
Yeah.
You do the bare minimum to get your driver's license, and then you're allowed on the road.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you're not going to drive a truck through a herd of nuns.
Yeah.
It just means you're allowed to drive.
Don't do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, compliance is the bare minimum to do work.
Oh my gosh.
The bare minimum.
Can I quote you on that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Or herd of babies, whatever. Like, I don't discriminate. Herd of whatever.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what do you do?
So the easiest way to describe what we do, because a variety of different groups of marketing folks and PR folks and other folks that are largely non-technical continue to sort of willy-nilly use technical jargon interchangeably.
Yeah, totally.
We unsubscribed from that whole rat race, and we call what we do attack simulation, because it's very easy to describe and there's no argument.
So
we say, what is attack simulation? Do you remember what happened to Sony Pictures?
Yes.
That's what we do.
Oh.
That's it. We pretend to be real attackers on a network.
See.
There's a lot of other different names that people have come up for it, like they call it adversary simulation.
Yeah.
Okay, what adversary are you simulating? How are you simulating that adversary? How can you argue that you are good enough to simulate that adversary unless you have some sort of crazy, like you're going to pretend to be China. Like, okay, are you using their malware on your customer's infrastructure? Because in a lot of circumstances, that's very bad.
Yeah.
It's uncontrolled. Like, how do you define that? So again, we're back into these murky waters. It's really straightforward to say, we pretend to be real attackers, like human beings, not code that pretends to be other attackers.
Yeah.
We work in teams like real attackers. We work around the clock like real attackers. We do what real bad guys do, like the team-based corporate espionage, nation-state level stuff. The intention of that is predominantly to validate whether a company has spent money wisely. The way I like to describe that is to say, you've been given $25 million as a security budget. What are you going to do with that $25 million? Well, you might buy a bunch of new Palo Altos.
Take it home and buy a new house.
Yeah.
I don't have a house actually, so buy my first house.
Yeah, with $25 million, you get yourself some aircraft too.
I will buy a fancy house and a lot of drones.
With a helipad.
With
a house with a helipad.
And a helicopter.
But
and lots of Sailor Moon collection
paraphernalia.
Paraphernalia.
So imagine you're spending all this money as a security program manager or CISO or what have you, and you're building a boat. Imagine in your mind that your security program is a boat, and you have to build this boat in a dry dock because you have to build the underside of it, you have to paint it, you have to make sure it's all sealed up and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then you're done with this boat, and it's a magnificent work of art, and you're like, this thing is fantastical, I love it. You take 3 steps back, and you're like, I love this boat. This boat's great. And then the ties walk up, and the ties are like, does it hold water? And you're like, I don't know. It's never seen the water. I've never put it in the water.
Yeah.
How do you know if the boat holds water?
Right.
Well, you put it in a little vat that simulates water. You know, you put it in a little thing, so if it sinks, it only sinks a foot.
Yeah.
So that it's a controlled environment in which to simulate the boat going out to sea. Because if you take the boat, you put it out at sea, and it can't hold water, the whole boat's toast.
So when you go in and attack these companies, per their guidelines, I'm sure, is it a controlled environment? Are you pretty much able to do whatever the heck you want?
Both. We are given, so Wikipedia defines red team as a targeted attack by a skilled attacker with the explicit intention of teaching the defenders where the gaps in security are.
Okay.
The trouble is that referencing these, we'll call them energetic PR people and sales people who willy-nilly swap vuln assessment and pen test and red team and attack sim and all these different words because all they care about is making the sale. If the customer defines the scope, it can't be a red team by definition.
Yeah.
Regardless of what magnitude of attacks you use, that's irrelevant. But if it's a question of scope, and if the company says, we own this whole building, everything in it is ours, we have a bunch of third-party contractors, they are their own separate business entities, we do not have the legal authority to tell you that you can legally attack them unless they give you that to you in writing, which has happened. For example, we did one of our biggest assessments we did was for power company.
Oh, really?
And the power company came to us and said, we have executive leadership that isn't taking this seriously. We need to refresh our equipment, we need to hire staff, we need to buy licenses for things, we need a SOC, we need to build out a room. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we want to do. It's going to dramatically improve our efficacy and our ability to respond to problems and our ability to be proactive.
Okay.
But all of that costs money, and we're having trouble getting money from leadership. How can we prove that this is important and they should worry about it?
Okay.
And I said, well, you have how many, you have a whole bunch of power plants. I said, yeah, like 40 or something. Okay.
Oh, wow.
They're solar, so they're all over the place.
Oh, okay.
Fun thing about solar, no moving parts, no chemistry, no fuel rods, you can turn a solar power plant off and it won't kill anybody.
So is that when they came to you?
They came to, it came to me on Twitter, and the first inquiry was, do you know anything about NERC SIP? And I said, well, yeah, before I started my own company, I spent some time at the power company in San Diego, and I know how the internals work there. And my co-founder, his whole family has been in nuclear for years and years and years. So yeah, between the two of us, I think we're pretty good with NERC SIP. Okay, can we set up a meeting? Yeah, sure. And then they said, to where I started, we're having trouble reaching leadership. How do we reach leadership? Do you have any power plants that are operational but not connected to grids that are not NERC SIP certified yet? Well, yeah, we have like 7. These are the ones that we want you to break into. Cool, can I turn one off? And the line went quiet for a moment. And I got nervous. And then they came back and they said, yeah, you can turn one off. I'm like,
oh,
perfect.
Nice, that's awesome.
How do you get non-technically inclined business folks who are interested in business mechanics and not the down in the weeds technical stuff to care that security is important?
Yeah.
You turn off the thing that prints the money.
Yep, absolutely.
So we did. Ooh. And it got a lot of attention because apparently the O&M company, the operations maintenance company, operations management rather, company that this customer had hired, had told them, this is unhackable, it's completely solid, like we have policies and procedures for all of this stuff. As soon as you hear
the words, this is unhackable, you're just like, okay, let's do it, bring it on.
100% of the time somebody says, this is unhackable, I guarantee you 100%. There's some, I mean, every single time, like you look at the news, like look at InfoSec Twitter. Every once a year, there's some company that comes out and says, this is unhackable, and then they're like gone in 3 months.
Bring it on.
Yeah, that's because the investors that paid for them to invent the thing got poked in the side by like elder god style people that have been in the scene for 20 years and said, hey, that's BS. And they went, really? And they said, here, look at this. And the investors went, and yanked their money.
That's horrible.
Yeah, why would you invest in something that's built out of lies? I mean, look at Norse, look at, what was that company that did the blood testing that was completely, this was big news like a month ago.
Yep.
I forget.
I talked about it on ThreatWire.
Yeah, those guys, that. Like, who would want to invest in that? Because when that tanks, all your money goes away. If you invested millions of dollars in this company and the people running it are just outright like liars and frauds, then all your money is going to go away. So there's no sense investing in that sort of stuff. Right?
Okay, so you've been doing this with a lot of different companies over the last several years, and I'm curious if you have any like fail stories as far as like companies failing or things that you have learned from an attacker standpoint, things that you've learned in the company.
Well, I have several of both.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it's story time with Viss.
I am full of stories, as I'm sure you well know.
Oh yeah.
But
you should see us when we get together at conventions too. We're bad. Like, give us a couple of beers and we'll have so many stories to tell.
Yeah. So I guess the intention here is to talk about how people that do attack can conduct themselves a little bit more elegantly in an environment. And some of the things that have bitten me in the past were things like, and this happens actually quite a lot. I'm sure that there's going to be a bunch of people in the audience that are like, oh, I've done that. One of the biggest things that bites people that do attack, when you're doing your initial port scan, your initial like surface reconnaissance, your initial, we have actually a service that we invented called Phobos Orbital Reconnaissance, which is this whole thing that is like a super deep, super wide, find absolutely everything we possibly can and define how scary or risky it is for the customer. And in the process of doing these sorts of things, you run into like, you need to nmap a bunch of stuff, or you need to scan things, or you need to talk to a web app. Or you need to, brute force a web app or do some things to figure out like what's scary and what isn't. You will find people that deploy customers that deploy their corporate website on like an EC2 T1 micro instance that has like 1 CPU and a gig of RAM.
Oh wow!
So if you hit it with a web browser, it's fine.
Yeah.
If you hit it with 2 web browsers, the box tips over.
Oh no!
And that's like before you even get to the scanners. Like if you hit refresh too fast, the box will tip over.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Well, because what they'll do is they'll set up like a WordPress blog.
Yeah.
And WordPress, Apache. So you got Apache, you got PHP, you got MySQL. You have all the disk rights there, and they won't tune anything. They'll just go with defaults across the board.
Oh no! And I'm sure it never gets updated.
That's a whole different. Well, it's not a whole different story. It's later in this story.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so you get that, right? So the first thing is you'll accidentally tip over equipment through no fault of your own because the equipment is poorly managed. You'll get the same thing with, and this has bit me quite a lot in the past, VPN links between routers or firewalls that are also misconfigured. If the tunnel is not configured adequately, you can exhaust the TCP sessions across that tunnel. And if you have office here and data center here, and this thing is how all the devs do their work, and you tip this thing over, everyone's SSH sessions die, all the file copy jobs die. If the phone system is in the data center, all the phones get disconnected. Like you're disconnecting the office from the data center.
Yeah.
And this can happen because, again, I've never done it with a browser, but if you exhaust those TCP sessions. So in that regard, if you're looking at this equipment from an administrative standpoint, and the TCP, like, so let's say, just hypothetically speaking, that these are Juniper Juniper firewalls, SRXs, and there's people wincing. I can hear you wincing. I'm there. I know. I'm gonna say it. They're Juniper SRXs, and there's an IPsec VPN link that's connecting the 2 of them.
Okay.
Let's say that they're configured to have 100,000 TCP sessions concurrently, and those TCP sessions will ebb and flow as people do things and as connections are established across that link.
Of course.
If that ebb and flow, the day-to-day, lives at like 90% capacity, if you're sitting at 90,000 sessions day-to-day, and your limit is 100,000 sessions, that means one nmap from a phone will knock that link down.
That's horrible.
And suddenly there's dudes with pitchforks and torches waiting outside of your cube.
Yep.
What did you do? You took the network down.
Why did you break it?
No, the house was on fire when I got here.
Yeah.
It was me shutting the door that caused the house to then fall over.
Yeah.
The house was on fire long before I got here, but that doesn't matter because it went down on your watch while you were doing the thing, so you're going to get the blame.
So it sounds like a lot of times the company has misconfigured something. You came into a broken field.
Yes.
And in order to make your job easier, these things should have been fixed a long time ago.
It's a catch-22.
Yeah.
It is arguable that you could say, yes, this stuff should have been fixed, but then you get into debates.
Yep, of course.
At the end of the day, you were hired to help identify, diagnose, and suggest remediations for the things that you're dealing with. So it's like being hired to walk into a mine. It's like being hired to walk across a minefield to tell the people at the end of the minefield that there are mines. That's what you're.
Yeah, basically.
And you have to walk on eggshells. You have to be very diplomatic. You have to be able to communicate clearly. You have to be able to gather your thoughts, and you have to be able to tell the customers horrible, terrible news in a way that makes them not want to immediately stab you in the throat. which is challenging. So, and I know there's a lot of people, and I used to be one of those people where like, no, I don't want to work with people, I just want to work with computers. That's cool, you can do that, but what you're doing is you're creating a glass ceiling for yourself, where to be able to function at the higher levels of business, to be able to have those negotiations, to be able to get large contract deals, to be able to do, you have to be able to deal with people, because your customers are people. The people that are going to shovel money into your bank account, you have to be able to communicate with them, and you have to be able to they have to be able to confide in you, and you have to be able to tell them, like, I'm here to help.
Yeah, totally.
And if they don't get the impression that you're there to help, then you're not going to get the job.
Yeah.
So things happen all the time, and context matters a lot. Attitude matters a lot. And it is not uncommon to ask leading questions to your customers to prevent these sorts of situations. Because the last thing you want to do is lose a contract because you knocked something over, when you could have just asked, can you give me a rough idea of the equipment that this is running on? Can you give me a rough idea of the network? So not every assessment is adversarial in nature. So we have a bunch of white box assessments that we do. And the white box assessments are like imagine going into a place with a hard hat on and saying, oh, there's black mold, that needs to be fixed, that fire suppressor, that fire extinguisher's out of juice, that electrical socket's on fire, you might want to look into that. There's a dude literally in your kitchen robbing you right now. We should probably stop and go deal with that guy. That's common. Getting into an environment, doing a gig, and then realizing, oh, there's somebody else's malware in here already.
Oh no.
So you pause and you're like, no, and you tell the customer, hey, there's people exfiltrating stuff from you that isn't us.
Yeah.
So then immediately it turns into an incident response gig.
Oh, I see. So you end up taking care of that too, huh?
75% of our revenue is blue team.
Wow.
Yeah, so the cool red team stuff, the cool attack stuff is like the tip of the spear.
Wow, that's surprising.
Yeah, so like we go in, we find a whole bunch of stuff, and then at the end of the gig, we produce remediation suggestions where we say, here's all the stuff we found, and here's how we think you should fix it.
Okay.
And then here's a bid on that work if you'll have us.
So speaking on that front, do you ever think that it's so far gone, or a company is so far gone that they're unfixable? Have you ever run into that kind of occasion? Nothing
is true. Well, put it this way. If the company functions at a base level and is generating revenue, you can pull them out of the muck. You can bring them back into the light and like dust them off.
You can always save them.
Yeah, you can just hit them with a power washer. Yeah, nothing is completely.
With a power washer.
Yeah, I mean, in certain circumstances, like there are certain pieces of technology and certain pieces of equipment that, for lack of the technology to remediate that equipment, you should just throw it away and get something that's better.
Yeah.
And those are edge cases because, so for example, we have custom malware that we wrote because on our larger end engagements, we tell people like, we will be China at you. So we have malware that will run on like MIPS IP cameras.
Oh, wow.
Like,
that's cool.
Yeah, and we designed that specifically because there is no such thing as antivirus for your IP camera.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and the idea is real bad guys will do this. Real bad guys will get in and they will tweak your DNS settings, so using their DNS server, not your DNS server.
And you want to be as like the real world attackers out there, the bad guys, as you can be, so that they can actually protect against the real, the black
That's the idea. At the end of the day, the idea is to train the blue team to be able to catch us. So if we get in and the blue team never finds us, we have to invent scenarios to be noisy.
Yeah.
We have to make noise purposefully to give the blue team a trail of breadcrumbs to try to get them to follow.
Yeah, totally.
Up to and including, at some point on one gig, literally rebooting domain controllers to try to get them to notice that we were there. And that didn't work because the hardware the domain controllers were on was so unstable they rebooted from time to time randomly anyway. So we're like, well, we're sort of out of ideas.
That's funny.
But yeah, so
I shouldn't laugh, but it's kind of funny.
It really spans the board. Like one gig that we did recently, we call it a lateral movement assessment. And there's a bunch of other terms that people have for this. The short version is, instead of trying to phish people or break into the office and physically like backdoor a machine or to like try and convince people to click on stuff or to do all the subterfuge, they just said, well, just presume that you got in, give us a code snippet and we'll run it on a laptop, and then you'll start with a shell in our environment.
Yeah.
And then from there, do as much as you can. Go as far as you possibly can. That was, I don't know if you may have seen that tweet that it was actually, somebody posted a tweet the other day of an oil rig on fire with a bunch of boats putting it out, and it was like, this is our production, or this is our Jira server.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I retweeted that saying, like, you forgot the boat that says, why is the Jira server end mapping our production environment?
Oh no.
I did that. I mean, and here's the thing, to turn the tables, right? So I got caught on that gig on that specific machine because they had honeypots in their production environment. And the honeypots, which should never be communicated to because all the infrastructure is designed to avoid them.
Yeah.
Like the honeypot should never ever get traffic.
Yeah.
Suddenly the honeypot's getting nmapped.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was kind of like shooting a flare in the air, like in the office.
Oops.
Yeah, like imagine shooting a flare in here. It's going to get a lot of attention.
Yes.
Probably from the fire department.
Yes, it would. They would obviously know who's at fault.
Yeah. It literally gun in my hand smoking. Like, yeah. They caught the box. I had stuff elsewhere, so I was able to persist in the environment, but they caught me on that machine, and they tried to do some degree of incident response. Now, that's the thing, to the other, offensive security folks in the crowd, depending on your customer's technical aptitude, they may or may not be using certain defensive technologies that you should be aware of before you do your gig.
Yeah.
For example, if you go and in your reconnaissance you look at their job postings and they mention specific firewalls or routers or switches or defensive hardware or SIMs or ELK or Splunk or Kibana or any, look at what they mention. And here's, again, a call back to if you're going to be a terrible car thief if you've never driven a car.
Yeah.
If you spent your time before doing InfoSec, or specifically before doing attack, because there are segments of InfoSec where you can totally just start from scratch. I don't think that attack is one of them, because to be an effective attacker, you have to know a litany about all these different technologies and how they all work together and how they coalesce and how they talk and what protocols there are and where the faults are and all the problems are.
Of course.
You're never going to learn that just like jumping into pen testing. Like, you're gonna run into
I was gonna ask how you felt about that, because I have heard that debate between a lot of people in the industry where on one side you have folks that say like, yeah, you can jump straight into it. On the other hand, you have people like me who came from the banking industry and also business from college who are like, no, it's smart to understand kind of how the network works as a whole before you jump into that industry, because there is so much information that you just kind of get pummeled with when you first start.
So there's the thing I've noticed about watching, like being pedestrian and watching those discussions on the internet is that the people saying that InfoSec is a great place to start tend to be people that do a very specific siloed role. They're only social engineers, or they only do malware reversing, or they only do a skill that does not require that you know dozens and dozens of different pieces of technology.
So like, for example, if you want to go straight into like lockpicking as an industry, then you could just straight up like learn that and that's it. And you wouldn't necessarily need some kind of starting role in a genre that's similar to that. You could just jump into it.
Well, with physical assessments, I mean,
physical.
Ideally, if you're going to go into physical, you're going to want to know at least very basic lockpicking. You're going to need to know how certain bypass techniques. You're going to need to know what kind of alarm systems exist, how they function. You're going to need to know what cameras look like, how to identify fake cameras from real ones. You're going to have to know like what response times are like. You're going to have to research what security company your customer is using, all that sort of stuff.
Makes sense.
A lot of it is on the job learning, and can be easily done if you're shadowing somebody that's been doing it for a very long time. It's a little bit like attack stuff where you're going to have to learn about a whole bunch of different things, but in a lot of these circumstances, you don't need to be a subject matter expert on a particular brand of camera. You just need to know enough to deal with it in the field.
That's how I feel about my job.
Yeah.
I just need to know enough to be able to talk about it.
But we're talking apples and oranges if you're talking about like learning enough to do a physical assessment and being a very effective attacker over the wire.
Yeah, totally.
Because going in over the wire, you're dealing with any number of multiple I mean, think of it this way. How many vendors go to Black Hat and set up booths at Black Hat?
I've never been to Black Hat.
Well, just take a guess.
I can tell you DEF CON.
Okay, how many vendors at DEF CON set up and try and sell defensive technology?
It's about 40 or less.
Okay. At Black Hat, I think it was somewhere between 200 and 500. I need to look at the database that they leaked again.
Really?
Hundreds of vendors. And
Dang.
That's who you're up against.
Wow, it's like RSA up in there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant RSA. I didn't mean Black Hat. Okay. Yeah, sorry. My brain, Black Hat and RSA are getting close to the same thing.
I know, right?
But
no, you say 500, and I think of that giant convention center.
Moscone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking in my brain.
Crazy.
Sorry, I meant RSA, but I said Black Hat, and that's
same difference.
Happens for a reason, right? So yeah, but that's what I was going. So RSA, think of RSA. How many vendors are RSA? Hundreds.
Hundreds, yeah.
That's who you're up against.
Yeah, totally.
Those are the people that are defending the customers that you are asked to attack. So if you have no idea who they are and you're not familiar with any of their defensive technologies, you're going to have a terrible time trying to do pen testing because they know more about the customer's environment than you do.
Yeah.
And what you need to do is turn the tables. If you know more about the environment than they do, then suddenly you have the high ground. And if that means going on the internet and finding a bunch of those password leaks, and you start the gig, who is it? FuzzyNop and Savant did a talk about, actually I think-
They're good people.
Dual Core, I think as well, the three of them
Dual
have
Core's
been,
good people too.
they've been doing this talk circuit where they talk about like, what do they call it? Full contact recon, I think, was a talk they did at Derby. And it basically talked about how you can, without sending a single packet to the customer, conduct enough reconnaissance to have usernames, passwords, email addresses, a litany of technologies that they use, possible vulnerabilities. You can have all the stuff without ever touching their environment or scanning their environment at all. It's just, it's being really good at interneting.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so like Dual Core wrote a thing called GitHump, which allows you to aim it at a GitHub repository and start pulling contact information out of it.
Okay.
FuzzyNop did a training where he talked about like a bunch of different ways you can go and look up people's histories, and like you can go and find forum posts for sysadmins talking about how I have this terrible problem with this Juniper SRX. It's blah, 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 blah. Well, they're obviously talking about the one at work.
Yeah.
So if you find this post, then you're getting intel about your customer.
Oh, no.
So
that's awesome.
If you take the time to do all of this stuff, then you're going to be at an advantage because you're being hired to test the efficacy of a defensive security department that has no idea you're coming and has no idea that you know stuff that's like internal information. And the more of that internal information you know before getting started, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, totally.
The best phishing that I ever did was finding examples of a CEO's emails to people for a financial organization.
Yeah.
And this guy had a tendency to write stuff from his iPhone that was like 8 words and then like -J.
Oh.
So
that's useful.
I found all of his direct reports.
Yeah.
He had like 5 or 6. I emailed all of them and I left off the CTO because I figured I just gave him the benefit of the doubt. I figured the CTO is probably technical enough to catch me or to call BS on my phishing email.
Yeah.
So I put together a spreadsheet, loaded it with macros and OLE objects, and sent it to them saying, as a CEO, I created a fake domain and sent it to them as a CEO saying, I need your eyes on this, -J. I got like 8 shells.
Oh no.
How did I get 8 shells? I only sent it to 5 people.
Wow.
Well,
somebody forwarded it to somebody else?
Some of the people that got the email saw that the CTO wasn't on the thread, so they forwarded it to him, which like doubled the credibility. And then the CTO was like, oh, I'm too busy to deal with this, and he sent it to 2 of his subordinates.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So, and that wasn't because like I'm master fisher or whatever. It was just because I took the time to figure out what an email from the CEO was supposed to look like.
Yeah, totally.
That's it. And it's just you do little tiny flecks of knowledge.
Wow.
And you're stacking them like Legos. And if you do it right, then you have the neat Lego toy that like transmogrifies.
A neat Lego toy that can offensively attack companies.
Yeah, and if you twist it the right way, like shells come out. Yeah. So I mean,
all the shells.
Yeah. So the idea is, I mean, also like with phishing stuff, presume that if you're going to send a fish to a bunch of people.
I don't send fishes to people.
You should.
I feel like they wouldn't appreciate it if I sent them a fish. Here's a fish.
You never know.
Do you like salmon?
It is so tasty. Expect that the machine that you fished will get caught. Like expect that you will have some window of opportunity to operate on that machine to do whatever it is you can do and call it 15 minutes before somebody realizes, oh hell, I clicked on a thing I wasn't supposed to click on. And then they shut the laptop and off it goes to IT. So you need to get on there and you need to pivot quick, like fast.
Yeah, of course.
How do you do that without setting off the honeypots?
Yeah.
How do you pivot super, super, super fast without end mapping everything? Some tricks.
Are you going to teach us some tricks?
I might.
Okay, cool.
I might be dropping a little bit of tradecraft.
Well, we're going to actually have Viss on for several episodes coming up. So he's going to teach us a few of the awesome little skill sets that you can learn in the industry. Is there anything else that you wanted to kind of fill our audience in on? Because we always get questions about this kind of stuff. So I think it's extremely insightful for them.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about how do I start, what do I want to do, where can I, what are some good resources, that sort of stuff.
Same.
And to me, that's like somebody going to a vet and saying, I want to work with animals.
Yeah.
Cool, what do you want to do? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I want to work with cars. Oh, what do you want to do? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Well, you're going to have to decide. Like, I'm not saying you have to pick just one, but pick a place to start, and it can't be, I want to hack.
Yeah.
Anybody can do that. Mm-hmm. But do you want to do research? Do you want to do offensive? Do you want to do defensive? Do you want to write code? Do you not want to write code? Do you only operate in Windows? Do you operate on Linux and Unix? Do you operate just on routing equipment? Like, what is your background and how will it apply to your life and security?
Yeah, totally.
For me, it was building, environments out of Linux and Cisco and wireless equipment and attaching Windows to that and having them all play nice together, and then literally flipping a table, running away screaming, and then deciding I wanted to hack it all. Basically like that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So for me, I was my last official blue team gig was I was a systems architect for a software company.
Yeah.
And my job was in that position to service 14 Java developers and maintain several servers that were their development environments. And I was told to harden them. Okay. Well,
easy enough.
I can do that. I mean, better now than I could back then, but some basics, right? Turn on a firewall, install fail2ban, look at a log from time to time.
Yeah.
Like super basic stuff is amazingly effective. Set password requirements, turn on 2FA. Simple.
Yeah.
And then the devs were loading code on there that's a shell. And I'm like, that just undid all of my work.
Oh, no.
Like I spent weeks and weeks and weeks building this fortress, and then they're like, I'm just gonna drill a hole in it. And then peekaboo.
No.
Well, all the security I just built was just waste. So I'm like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So and at that point it was, and I'm sure there's a lot of folks that are going to be listening saying, oh, I feel exactly the same way. My security recommendations and my abject unwillingness to just let them continue doing this on equipment that I had frustratingly stood up and built and made come to life.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to hear my gripes. They were just like, no, your job is just to keep it alive.
Yeah.
Like, keep it alive, make it secure. I'm like, well, it's alive, but I can't make it secure because you keep unsecuring it.
Yeah.
Like going back to the boat, right?
Yeah, totally.
You finish this boat and a guy just comes up and drills a hole in the boat. You're like, what are you doing?
It's a passion.
No, it's he's allowed to do that. Well, the boat can't go in the water now. Well, sure it can. Well, you're gonna have a bad day, like a really bad day.
Yeah.
So at some point I just left, and I went from that to peanuts.
Yeah.
Doing my first consulting jobs. I didn't go work for another company. I started freelancing at that point.
Wow.
And my first jobs were my WordPress blog got compromised. Please help.
Yeah.
Let's go look at the log. Oh, look, here it is in the log. Here you go. So, and then I just kept doing that, and it was exactly the same stuff I was doing as a sysadmin, mechanically, but for a different purpose. I was still grepping logs.
Interesting.
I was still writing scripts. I was still installing fail2ban. I was still exactly the same work, but the end result wasn't to build a product that's going to have horrible Java code in it.
Yeah.
The end result was that my work was the end result.
Yeah, totally.
So it was
that's cool.
Deobfuscation.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah, so it's a lot more rewarding, and that's one of the reasons that pen testers have burnout, because they'll go to customers year over year, month over month, or what have you, and the only thing, and I hear this phrase used a lot, the only thing that changes on the report is the date.
Oh, wow.
Because, again, back to compliance,
nothing.
Sarbanes-Oxley, PCI to some degree, but by and large, the majority, like HIPAA especially, a lot of these regulatory compliance bodies don't hold a gun to your head and make you do anything with the results of your pen test.
Yeah.
The language in the compliance paperwork says you have to get a pen test, so they do. But it doesn't say you have to do anything else, so they don't do anything else.
Wow. It just says you have to do the test.
And that's it.
Who cares if you actually fail or you pass?
It's irrelevant. Yeah. So what they do is, the auditors come around and they go in and they get the test out of the drawer and they dust it off. They're like, I got a pen test. And the auditor goes, cool, check. And they go on to the next thing.
Terrible. Oh gosh, that's so bad.
That's security in America.
See, when I was working in restaurants, if you get your safety and sanitation test and you fail, you get shut down.
That's right. but Equifax.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Perfect
Equifax.
example. Equifax. Ugh.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you keep on grinding.
Yeah, I'm going to keep doing we're trying to change security from the inside. So our whole thing is compliance isn't security, and we'll prove it to you.
That's awesome.
So like, you can be completely compliant. We're still going to walk out with everything. And the reason that we're walking out with everything is because, well, here's an interesting thing to consider. If you tell somebody what the bare minimum is, they're going to do the bare minimum.
Yeah.
If you don't tell anybody that there is a bare minimum, they will, out of sheer paranoia, do way more than they need because they want to feel secure, and they have no way to measure if they've done enough. So they'll continue to do more and more and more and more, and they'll stay up at 2 a.m, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if they're safe.
Oh, interesting. That's a good point, though.
Because you didn't tell them that there was this minimum, this bottom line.
Yeah.
So when you tell people, the security program at your company has to be barely breathing. It has to barely have a pulse, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Then that's the minimum that they do. But if you don't tell them anything, then that body has to get up and run a marathon. And they're like, well, we want this thing. We want this to be the $6 million man, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, totally.
Well, you tell people you don't have to worry about the safe side.
Work a lot harder than they would.
Yeah, and that's been my experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so like we're showing people like you can be like super gold star, like done everything right,
totally.
Green lights across the board compliance, but like we can still just power plant.
Well, Viss, I think this was extremely insightful, and I love hearing about what you do because, I work in a studio, so I don't get out there and work with companies on their security, except for that one time that I went to YouTube and I hacked the YouTube studio. So that was really cool. But outside of that, of course you did. But outside of that, I don't really get to go out and do these things. So I praise you for what you're doing. I think it's really important work for the industry, and I think it's important that we have people that are as passionate as you are. So I'm sure that we have a lot of questions out there. Of course, you can comment below. Where can people reach out to you, too, if they have questions? Also, pro tip, do not ask Viss or I to help you hack your girlfriend's Facebook or anything like that. We're not going to help. But
teach me how to hack.tumblr.com. Ask me how to hack.
It's a thing.
I'll make you famous.
Yep, it's a thing. But where can people reach you if they have questions about getting into this, or where can they learn more about you?
Well, I'm Viss on Twitter, Viss, and my email is dan@phobos.io. And I'm generally open to inquiries, at least serious ones. But in terms of like learning where to get started and learning what to do, if you want to get started doing attack, then there is a litany of YouTube videos and walkthroughs and how-tos and blog posts for how to. So think of it this way: every neat trick, every hacker thing that somebody does is a tool in a toolbox.
Yeah.
And when you're just beginning, you have an empty toolbox. So you start out with one tool. You get your first screwdriver, you get your first wrench, whatever.
Yeah.
At some point,
first USB rubber ducky.
Yeah. At some point, 10 years down the road, you have like 4 toolboxes and they're all packed to the gills.
Yeah, totally.
Well, you got to start somewhere, right? So pick one thing and do one thing. And I'm fortunate that these guys exist. Hackthebox.eu, if you've heard of hackthebox.eu.
Yeah.
Hackthebox.eu is a lab. They have a free offering and a paid offering, and the paid offering is a whopping €10 a month, which is like, I think it comes out to like $11.50 or $12 a month.
Yeah, that's
which
not
is
bad.
It's a pittance for what it is. It's a VPN lab. You connect to the lab, and then there's like 40 machines, and you can practice.
Dude.
And it's specific challenges for specific machines, and there's like this system where it's like a CTF.
That's
where you go in and you get flags and you report the flags to the server and you get credit.
I should try that.
Yeah, yeah.
That sounds fun.
And the entry level stuff is super, super easy. Like literally a computer that's got a specific name, you point Metasploit at it and like you press a button, like press button, get shell. Like,
that's so cool.
Yeah, and you work your way up to there, all the way up to like you have to find the source code of a binary that they've hidden somewhere on the internet.
Wow.
Compile the binary, or no, maybe there isn't source code. Maybe it's just the binary. You have to open the binary in debugger, and you have to write a buffer overflow for the binary to use. Yeah, so it goes all the way up to like super advanced stuff.
That's legit.
Yeah, and then there's pivoting ones, and then there's like crypto ones. There's a whole bunch of other.
So hack in the box.
Hack the box.
Hack the box.
Hack in the box is a conference.
Oh, that's what I was thinking of.
HITV. Hack in the Box is a conference. Hackthebox.eu is the site.
Cool.
And they're really friendly people. They have like a shout box on there, and I think they had a Slack channel for a while, but they changed it to Mattermost. Is that right?
I don't know.
Yeah, there's some new thing that
Something
competes
like
with
that.
Slack. Yeah.
And then for your company, it's phobos.io.
Yeah,
correct?
Phobos. PHO. Like this on the shirt.
Like your shirt.
That's right.
Which I love the pixelated.
Yeah, I'm all about the old school. So like all of our stuff, all of our stickers are Doom themed and like it's all 8-bit
Yes.
pixelated. Yeah.
So great. I definitely saw the Doom sticker outside of our office. Yeah.
I may have deposited some
There
more.
might have been some Doom stickers put up around the place.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Viss. Really appreciate you coming on, and
Yep.
I'm super excited to see everything that you're going to share with us in the coming weeks. Of course, if you are interested in learning more, again, hit the comments below. Make sure to subscribe as well so you don't miss any of our Hak5 episodes, and check out hak5.org for more awesome stuff just like this. And until next week, do you know how to end the show with me?
Trust your technolist.
Trust your technolist.
Domain.com has all your website needs, from .com and .net domains to intuitive website builders, so you can take that first step in creating your online identity. Let me tell you, there's no domain extension like a .com or a .net, or if you want to brand yourself, Domain.com has over 300 domain extensions like .club and .space. These guys are huge fans of Hak5. They're affordable, reliable. We've been using them for years. They've got all the tools you need to share your ideas with the world. And because they're such big fans, they are hooking you up with 15% off their already affordable prices. So get domain names and web hosting and email, and just be sure to use that coupon code HAK5. So when you think domain names, think domain.com.
Goodbye, Internet.
You're better than MG.
Oh, am I?
Don't tell him I said that.